Okay, so we're going to do a little introduction to some watercolor techniques. And this video is going to be the first of our watercolor techniques, which is going to be wet on wet. This is an example of a watercolor chart made from a set just like this, which is probably what you have at home, where you can see the variety of colors that can be made by just adding different colors together. And you can see that you have like red, orange, yellow, green, blue, violet, and black, and then also some colors mixed with brown and some tints of colors, which is lighter versions. We may not be doing this whole chart, but I just want you to start seeing how much variety of color you can get from watercolor. So today we're going to be working on some watercolor techniques, and in this video I'm going to demonstrate wet on wet techniques. Before you begin with any of these techniques, what I want you to do is go through and put a couple of drops of water in each of your color ovals or color squares. Each of these little trays of color has watercolor pigment, and this watercolor pigment will either be very pale if it's mostly water and a little bit of pigment, or it'll be pretty dark if it's mostly pigment with a little bit of water. So your water to pigment ratio determines what your watercolor will look like. And if you put a little bit of water in each tray, it's going to start breaking down that pigment so that when you do pick up your color, you're going to get a lot more of that pigment already because the pigment has started to break down with that water. So this is a good way to prepare your paint so that you can get really good colors instead of just getting those pale watercolor colors. For the wet on wet technique, what you're going to do is take some water on your brush and draw a shape with just water. You can't really see it too well here, but I am filling in that shape and kind of leaving this rectangular puddle on my paper. I am working on watercolor paper. You have samples of watercolor paper in your take-home kits, so that's what you should use. All right, now once I have my square, I'm going to take a color on my brush, get a little bit on my brush. I'm just going to drop it in. And what happens is that water creates a little bit of a boundary so that the pigment will fill that wet space. This is really good for like sky, clouds. I can also do like a tie-dye effect. I can take another color and add that in. Make sure to wash your brush off in between colors so that you don't mess up your paint palette. And this is the wet on wet technique. You can mix a little bit. So if I wanted to make these colors blend more, I can move them together and they'll blend and mix. Wet on wet technique, go ahead and try this out on your watercolor paper. Shouldn't be a huge space. We will be using this in our upcoming project.